This is Jan, and we are going to discuss operating expenses today. If you're a tenant, buyer, seller, anyone in commercial real estate, this is for you. We are going to dive into exactly what operating expenses are, particularly if you're leasing property for the first time. All right, so operating expenses are a combination of the expenses that are needed to operate a property. I know that sounds like wordplay, but here's really what they mean. They mean the conjunction of the various costs that go into operating a property. So let's go ahead and divide these costs. Cost one, each property has property taxes. Okay, property taxes are paid to your local government, your local city. They are paid in order for you to be able to operate the property. That is a non-negotiable. Now, the basis of your property taxes changes. It can go up and down for various reasons. Now, if you're a tenant, if you're leasing and you have a triple net lease, then you are more than likely going to be paying for property taxes. That's why it's important for you to understand this. So the ownership will receive a property tax bill, but they will pass that expense off to you as the tenant. So it's important for you to understand the actual basis of the building that you are leasing. Now, a general rule is if the property was bought a long time ago, the longer the time horizon on that acquisition, the lower the property taxes are. So for example, if a building was purchased in 1980, it will more than likely have a much lower property tax base than a building purchased in 2026. And that's because property taxes are taken as a formula typically of the purchase price. All right, so property taxes are part of our operating expenses. So remember, if you're a tenant and you're a single tenant in one building and you have a triple net lease, you are going to be paying for property taxes. So understanding the property tax base of the property that you're leasing is something you have to know. All right, what else is included? Well, there is property insurance, and that's different than your own liability insurance that you would have for your own business, let's say. So property insurance can vary in costs. So let's take two buildings, for example. We have a building that is 10,000 square feet. Both buildings are 10,000 square feet. One building has newer improvements. It has a newer electrical system, a newer plumbing system. That owner really took that building and has refurbished it and has upkept the property. It's essentially a newer property. It hasn't been redeveloped, but all the parts that make up the building have been tended to and are new. Whereas the other property is also 10,000 square feet. Sounds the same, right? But the interior fixtures of that property, the interior systems of that property have not been updated for a really long time. And so the insurance company sees liability. They're looking at calculating their costs so that it makes sense for them to insure both of those properties. Each of those properties is going to have a very different yearly property insurance cost because of how they've kept up the buildings. And so when you're looking at your triple net fees, you have to look at, well, if I'm looking at two buildings, one may have a substantially higher property insurance. One could be about $40,000 a year, whereas the other one could only be about $2,500, and depends on what carrier they're using for insurance, what broker they used, but ultimately depends on the area of the building, the state of the property. And so property insurance can vary astronomically, just like property taxes can. So that's really important to understand. And then lastly, we have maintenance. Now, what does maintenance mean? We have to define what maintenance means. It shouldn't mean that the property owner can reposition and fix everything up in the property and then charge it to you. That is not what maintenance should mean. Maintenance should mean there is something that is extremely necessary that has to be done that would, if it is not done, would impede on your ability to be in the property, right? So think of it as possibly a driveway that's extremely cracked. Things like a roof. Maybe there's a system to the property that has to be completely redone. Obviously, check your lease agreement, but define what maintenance is. You should not be paying for someone to completely reposition, repaint the building, change all the flooring, and do all of these things, and then bill you for that. Now, the conjunction of all of these different variations of costs, property taxes, property insurance, and maintenance is what makes up an operating expense. So I want you to understand that. That is the definition. And I want you to look under the hood a little bit more and really look at what the basis is of the building that you're interested in. Property taxes are public information. They're out there. You can find them on various sources on the internet. And so you should have a really good understanding of what your actual triple net costs are going to be, aside from what the broker tells you or the landlord tells you. Or if you're the landlord or landlord broker, then you want to understand exactly what those costs are and how they're calculated. But really, if you're a tenant and you are being billed for these costs, then understand how you're actually being billed and make sure that you understand the calculation, because oftentimes there are mistakes and you don't want to overpay. I appreciate you watching. If this was valuable, like, subscribe, share. If this is helpful to you and you want to work with us, click the link. You know where to find us. We appreciate you watching. I hope you have a great day.